Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have something super cool to take a look at because I have the pleasure of potentially, if you've never heard of them, introducing you to a brand new company that I, until recently, had never heard of either. And I hope I'm saying their name right, but this is the Aulita Heroes 1/36th scale articulated Tyrannosaurus Rex, and obviously you don't see it quite yet because I didn't bring it in yet. But I did open the box already. I just couldn't help myself. I was way too excited to actually see this, so I opened the box as soon as it came. But I wanted to show you guys the box. It's just your standard box, basically, but what I really love about this is the fact that they kind of recreated the cover. If I could just get a spot where the glare isn't going to annihilate it. They kind of recreated the cover of Carnosaur. If you've ever seen that movie, it's an older Roger Corman dinosaur movie, and I love the movie. I love all three of them, no matter how cheesy or horrible they are. I absolutely adore those movies. So when I had noticed that this was kind of an attempt to recreate the cover art for Carnosaur with obviously their own image of their articulated Tyrannosaur, I was beyond excited about that, and I love the artwork here that they have on the front of this. I'm definitely going to be keeping that image there of the T-Rex because, again, Carnosaur is something that is just near and dear to my heart. It's a movie I watched all the time, not when I was a little kid because there's a good bit of gore in it, but as I was growing up, early teens and stuff, I watched that film constantly, and I still do to this day. I constantly revisit it. So having it with the kind of Carnosaur image here on the front is really cool, and you can also get a sneak peek of what the T-Rex actually looks like, and you may also be able to take notice to the fact that this is a company based in Canada. You can see right there, made in Canada. So it's a Canadian company producing articulated dinosaur figures. I believe they only have the T-Rex out currently, but they do have intentions of creating more. If you're looking for an accurate T-Rex, this is definitely not your guy. This thing looks awesome. So here is our T-Rex, and this thing is so crazy cool looking. Like, it is just about as exaggeratedly awesome as a Tyrannosaurus could possibly get. And what I like about it is, of course, it being really nicely articulated. It has the ability to kind of stand in more of like a modern day take on a T-Rex type stance. But since it's so crazy looking and so exaggerated, I personally love the fact that I can kind of give it that, if I can get the feet positioned correctly, give it that vintage tail-dragging version of a T-Rex sort of look, and it looks so good. It looks pretty much perfect as far as that kind of like vintage T-Rex would, and that is super cool to me because I love vintage dinosaurs, and having an articulated T-Rex that looks so good as a vintage version is definitely an awesome thing because I can't think of any really besides like maybe the Definitely Dinosaurs version, and that's not all that articulated. And there might be a few others, as time went on, but I don't think I've ever seen one with so much articulation that looks as crazy cool as this one does. And I love the fact that they've chosen such dark tones of color for it, and they actually have quite a bit of color applied to it because that as well gives it that vintage look, I think. Because again, we always perceived T-Rex and most dinosaurs as kind of like large lumbering lizards with dark kind of bland colors, and that's exactly what they've done here with this Rex, which I absolutely adore in every way possible. So what we're going to do is go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at this really cool Tyrannosaurus right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Rex, you can obviously see this isn't your traditional modern day version of a T-Rex. It looks super cool. We've got some really nice looking details to the head sculpt here as far as like the skin texture and stuff. Looks really quite nice. But we also have these like large osteoderms and stuff all over here on the lower jaw, leading up here around the eye area and stuff, giving it that almost terrifying type of a look, and I really think it looks awesome the way they've sculpted this out. The entire Rex, honestly, overall has a very rough and rugged, again, kind of almost like armored sort of an appearance to it, making it look even cooler. But you can again see they've done a really good job as far as adding in really nice coloration, I think. You've got a lot of different tones of color as you have variations of greens, blacks, and you also have variations of browns, as I could see lighter and darker shades of browns on top of the lighter and darker shades of greens on top of the blacks. Lots of color variation, and it's all really nice and naturally applied. And I think that really does look quite beautiful. You can see the eyes are painted with a yellowish tone, giving a nice black pupil in there, which also looks quite nice. And then you've got the nostrils sculpted out, of course, up here in the tip of the snout. I like that they have a lighter green here in the palette to really make that area shine quite nicely. You, of course, do have an articulated jaw. So we open the mouth right there, and you've got the jaw open. You can see that we've got a nice tongue sculpted out there on the inside of the mouth. You've also got some nicely sculpted out teeth for the upper and lower jaw of the T-Rex, which look pretty darn good. You can see the inside of the mouth as well. Sports some fairly nice looking detail in there. We've got a nice kind of a dark, maybe like a reddish or maroonish type of a tone of color there for the inside of the mouth, and it looks really nice with the mouth open, just like it did with the mouth closed. And the articulated jaw, although it's a little stiff sometimes to open up at first, see, it's a little stiff at first. Once you open it, it moves pretty nicely, and you can see both the upper and lower jaws kind of move away from each other, which allows some really nice articulation in that area. And you can obviously also see we've got a joint of articulation right here behind the head, which allows you to kind of lift the head up and put the head back down. Another thing, speaking of that I really do like about the Rex is look how big and bulky the throat is. That looks really neat to me, and I also love that they've kind of given it like some reddish tones in there, almost like reddish brown tones in the throat region. And again, it articulates really nicely, but the larger throat just looks super cool. As you lead up here to the top of the head, you can continue to see, again, almost that sort of armored type of a look. As you lead back here into the neck, you have like osteoderms and ridges all over the place on the back of this Rex. It is just heavily armored overall, but you also again have some really nice color variation, as we have a large majority of darker greens running along the back of the Rex, but you can also see some slight color variation included within. And then as you lead down here into the side of the neck, you've got kind of like some skin wrinkles and creases and stuff. You also have some really smooth transitions as far as the coloration goes. Really nice looking application of the paint. As you lead down here, you again have another area of articulation at the bottom of the neck. You can kind of turn the neck left and right a little bit and up and down. Not super far, but it definitely gives you more mobility in the neck region of the Rex, which is nice. As you lead down here a little bit further, you start to see again some more kind of wrinkling and stuff here in the shoulder area leading down into the arms of your Rex. You definitely have some muscle definition. You can see we get a nice darker green for the arms, and then you lead down into the hands. You've got some pretty nicely sculpted fingers, again our 2 digits for the Rex, and you can also see the nails are sculpted pretty nicely right there. And we do have articulation, of course, in the arms. They can move forward and back and kind of out away from the body a little bit too, so you've got some pretty smooth articulation throughout that area. As you lead back up here into the stomach region, you can again see more really nice skin texture. You've got some nice skin wrinkles down here. And then as you lead up a little bit further, again, you start to see those kind of like ridges and osteoderms and stuff picking back up. You can also start to see more kind of like skin wrinkles and stuff there in the stomach region. You can definitely see a large sort of scoop-like armored type of an appearance running along the spinal column of the Tyrannosaur right here. You can also see that we have another area of articulation here in the midsection. Now, if you move it over a little too far, you can see obviously the opening there where the dinosaur articulates, and you can see the joint there on the inside is a bluish coloration. I don't think that takes away from the figure too much or anything like that, because it almost is another situation similar to like Takara Tomy, where the ball joints are like they're part of their charm. I feel like the appearance to the articulated joints of this may be part of this company's charm as well. But as you move back, you again have a nice big bulky leg here, big bulky thigh. You can again see a little separation here in the area of articulation, but again, that's just part of the way that the dinosaur articulates. You can see though that the thigh moves very nicely, very smoothly. It can also kind of wiggle out away from the body a little bit, but forward and back very nicely. You've got some nice scoots running down the front of the thigh, as well as, again, the muscle definition. And you can really see how much color variation they have, as they have variations of browns and greens here that look really good. They definitely painted this out in a really nice, realistic way. As you move down, you again have the calf muscle, but look at how awesome looking this is. It almost gives me the feeling of like a dinosaur suit that would have been used in a film in maybe like the 1980s. That's kind of the way that I feel about this. It looks like it would be some sort of a crazy man in a suit sort of dinosaur from the 1980s, and I love that stuff so much. But you can again see we have more articulated joints as you move down the course of the leg. You've got one right here in the knee. If I can keep the thigh kind of still, you've got one in the knee. You've also got one right here, as well as down here in the ankle, and you can also move the toes. So you can move the toes down and up. Obviously, the toes don't move freely, like independently from each other. They move together, but it works, and it works quite nicely. You've also got the toes sculpted out right there, some scoots running down the toes, and again the nails sculpted out there at the end of the feet, which look pretty good. As you lead back up here into the tail, again you have more of that sort of armored appearance running along the back of the tail, but you also have some nice looking skin texture here running along the side of the tail, as well as some skin wrinkles and stuff as you lead down a little bit further into the bottom of the tail. And as you lead out, you've got a spot of articulation right here. Also has that similar look to it as far as what the midsection had, where you can kind of see the inside of the dinosaur as you articulate it. The tail goes up, down, and left and right very nicely. But as you move back out a little bit further, you've also got another spot right here. Again, exact same style of articulation. Then another one right here where you can do all those same things, which helps to give you some really nice posability, really nice display options for the T-Rex. And then, of course, it ends in a nice tip there for the tip of the tail. The underside as well sports some really nice detailing, as well as some really nice paint work. As you move along here, you can see it looks really good. I just love how good of a job they've done of painting this. Like, look at the really nice alternate tones of color running along the underside of the Rex. Very realistic paintwork throughout. But you can see, of course, being an articulated figure, the opposing side isn't going to look too different from what you would expect from the initial side. Again, it looks pretty much exactly the same. Really, really well done overall. Again, I just really dig the style of this figure. I dig everything about this. The overall appearance, even the way that it's articulated, like, it's just so cool, so unique, and definitely almost a breath of fresh air because it's so different from the majority of the articulated dinosaur figures that we see nowadays. This thing is just one of the coolest T-Rex figures that I've ever seen. Being a huge fan of kind of vintage dinosaurs and also just being a huge fan of sort of exaggerated dinosaurs, this thing is right up my alley, and I absolutely love this T-Rex. And I also wanted to show you guys that it can stand quite nicely even in, the positioning with the tail up off of the ground. I had it kind of standing more so freely earlier in the tripod position, which is my personal preference for the figure. But it can also stand like this as well, which is nice. And again, the size of it is definitely impressive because you do have a pretty big size for the Rex overall. Like, it definitely has a very, very impressive size. It's not massive, but it is by no means small. It is certainly a large figure. And to show you that, we're going to go ahead and get a measurement. First of all, let's get that tail down a little bit straight out. So I think that'll do for now. For a length, you are looking at about actually, let's go ahead and get right there on the tip of the tail, straight to the snout. So you're looking at about 13¼ inches or around 33½ centimeters. Now I just knocked him over again. You have to position the feet in a spot where he'll stand, because that's just how articulated dinosaurs work. Actually, you know what? We're going to go ahead and lift him up to get the tripod position height, because that's going to make him taller. And also, it's the positioning that I personally would stand it in. So for a height just shy of 7 inches or around 17½ centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Aulita T-Rex, and you can definitely see it has a pretty good size to it. Like, it's definitely tall on top of just in general having some good body mass and length to it. So it is without question a nicely sized figure, and I'm a little bit thrown off as far as what figures to use as a comparison, because like I don't have very many, if any at all, other dinosaur figures that are similar to this. Like, I've got articulated tyrannosaurs, they are all over the place, but you just don't have articulated tyrannosaurs that are as unique as this one. So I'm not entirely sure what figures to use as a comparison, so we'll just bring in some randoms, I guess. For another comparison, we have the Beasts of the Mesozoic 1/35th scale Tyrannosaurus Rex here, next to the Aulita Heroes version here, and you could definitely see again a pretty decent size difference between the two, just because we've got the Aulita version kind of standing more upright, and it also has a little bit more body mass than the Beasts of the Mesozoic version. Then we've got a few of the randoms we've been using quite a bit lately with the Schleich Diabloceratops, the Safari LTDU Tyrannus, and the Collect A Deluxe Dimetrodon next to this T-Rex to yet again show you that it does have quite the impressive size. For another comparison, we've got ourselves a Mattel Velociraptor and a Mattel Dilophosaurus here next to the Aulita T-Rex, yet again to show you a size and to help hopefully give you an idea of how large this is if you happen to have any of these figures that I've chosen to bring in for comparisons so far. Again, we are just going as random as possible with these comparisons, as we now have the Beasts of the Mesozoic Avaceratops for a comparison, but for one final comparison, just to hopefully give you an idea of the size, we have one of the Rebor Retrosaur Tyrannosaurus Rex next to the Aulita version, which is a very different style figure, but at the same time, it's sort of a vintage interpretation of a T-Rex, which I think that the Aulita version nicely kind of replicates a vintage version of a T-Rex, two very different styles of vintage Tyrannosaurs, but one that I felt like might potentially be a decent comparison piece here for this T-Rex. So this Aulita Heroes Tyrannosaurus Rex is awesome. I'm beyond excited about having this figure, not only in my collection, but just finding out now about Aulita and how cool their figures are. Because again, when it comes to exaggerated sort of stylized versions of Tyrannosaurs, we don't get very many. Like, you really don't get as many as you would expect to, and we really don't get any as cool looking as this one. So when I had initially found out about this figure, when I had initially seen this, I was really psyched about it. It was definitely something that kind of blew my mind a little bit and hyped me up because it's so different from what we usually get. It's so unique compared to most sort of Tyrannosaurs nowadays. You're either getting Jurassic Park T-Rex or you're getting more accurate attempts at a T-Rex, and you don't really get the kind of stylized, and you really don't get the kind of vintage versions of Tyrannosaurs in an articulated form, especially like this. So having something that's different, having something that's unique, that will stand out in a crowd like this definitely does, is a breath of fresh air if you ask me. And again, they've done a very good job on sculpting this out with lots and lots of fine detail, giving it that kind of almost heavily armored sort of an appearance, and again, that very vintage sort of a look, which I love. They also have done a very good job of applying a lot of really nice paintwork. When you look at it from afar, it almost looks like it's just kind of like a, dark-looking dinosaur figure. But when you get nice and close and you really inspect it like we did with our closer look, you could really see how much color variation they have included in this figure. Like, there is a lot of color in it, and it looks great the way that they've painted it. Again, especially for me, being a fan of vintage Tyrannosaurs, it is great having one that has this type of coloration because it pretty much perfectly replicates that sort of old school T-Rex color that we would have seen depicted in books and films when I was younger. On top of that, you've got lots of articulation, and that is always a great thing. You have tons of articulated joints throughout the course of this Rex, making it possible to create all sorts of dioramas and posing options for your Tyrannosaur, which is always fun. Articulated dinosaurs right now are like the hottest thing, it seems, so it's really cool to now have plenty of different options from plenty of different artists and companies creating articulated dinosaurs, and now we get to throw the Aulita Heroes group into the mix with this insanely cool, very, very stylized, but yet quite awesomely vintage Tyrannosaurus Rex. So, if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that on the Etsy shop of Aulita Heroes. And I must say, it is a very high recommendation from me. Definitely an awesome figure all around. So make sure you check that link in the description. Go follow Aulita Heroes and stay up to date on everything that they are creating and releasing, because again, they do have other dinosaurs coming. And again, pick up this figure for sure because it is awesome. And make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.